Something that I think we as a collective really need to understand about impulse buying and unhealthy shopping habits is that we are in control of our choices. And therefore, we are the ones that have to take action if we want things to change. And the problem that I find to be the biggest issue when it comes to these unhealthy shopping habits is not being able to tap into your intuition. And honestly, I have found that this has been the biggest game changer when it comes to my own shopping habits. I've seen it with friends, I've seen it with clients, I've seen it with a ton of different people. And so it's really important to understand what exactly this means and how to recognize it in various parts of your shopping journey, which is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some key principles that you should keep in mind, you should keep in the back of your pocket as you are shopping if you want to work towards being a more intentional, intuitive shopper. So what exactly do I mean when I say intuitive shopping? So at its core, intuitive shopping is all about making thoughtful, aligned purchases that are actually going to serve you. Not what's trending, not what's cheap, not what some influencer is trying to convince you to buy in a 30-second TikTok. It's about what is actually going to serve you. This is your time to be selfish, okay? This is about making sure that things are aligning with yourself. It's really about leading with critical thinking skills opposed to impulse, right? So throughout this video, I really want to emphasize that intuition and critical thinking skills are best friends in this process. You have to have both in order to make the best decision for you when it comes to shopping or honestly anything in your life. Critical thinking skills and your intuition are key. So just make sure that you are keeping this in mind as we walk through the principles I'm going to be sharing with you, because at the foundation of every single principle is intuition and critical thinking skills. The first principle that I want you to keep in mind as you move forward on this intuitive shopping journey is that a cheap price does not justify a purchase. I think that honestly, we've been conditioned to think that if something is cheap, that we should just have it because. Just because. It's cheap, so what do you have to lose? And this is something that it took a really long time for me to get over and move on from, because I've always been a bargain shopper. I've always been somebody who is looking for the lowest price. But the issue with that is when you are purchasing because of the price, not because of the item. If you come across something that is super, super cheap and your admiration for the item grew more after you learned how cheap it is, that might be a problem. I'm not saying that you should never buy anything that's super cheap or super discounted or whatever. I'm just saying that in order to justify a cheap price, you want to make sure that the item is actually going to serve you. Do you have enough pieces in your wardrobe that already go with it? Does it have a place within your home already, or do you have to make space for it? Is it something that you could see yourself wearing really often, or is it a one-time thing and then never again? So this is where I think it's really important to ask yourself, if this item was full price, would I still want it? Am I only attracted to it because it's so cheap? I understand how saving money and that appeal of a really low priced item is nice. I completely get it. That's honestly part of the reason why I thrift so much, is just because the prices are so cheap. However, again, that cheap price should not justify you purchasing. There has to be a ton of other reasons why you want the item outside of just this cheap price. Another principle I want to talk about is keeping a wish list. One of the best ways to become a more intuitive shopper is to slow down the process. We definitely are conditioned to think that we need items as soon as we start to crave them. This used to be me, and sometimes it still is, and we have to fight the demons, of course. But I think that being intentional and actually slowing down that process is going to rewire your brain to understand what's actually going to serve you and what's important. And you can do this as easily as making a wish list. Now, I've heard from some people this doesn't work completely for them, and I've heard from others that it's, the best thing they've ever done. So take it with a grain of salt. Take all of these principles with a grain of salt. Make sure you're applying what works best for you. but I have an entire notes app in my phone of things that I've, eyeballed over the past year or so. And I basically will just write it down if I want it. And I'll revisit it in a couple weeks or even months for that matter. And between the time that I write it down and the time I revisit it, I most of the time forget about it. Like, there's really nothing that is so urgent in my life for me to acquire that, it's bothering me every single day after I write it down to buy it. You also don't have to wait weeks or months or anything like that. It could even be 24 hours and then you revisit that list or that item, or it could be 5 days. But what I have found is that oftentimes that feeling of, oh my God, I really need this, kind of just goes away once it's out of my mind. So if you do add something to your wish list and in a few weeks you look at it and you're like, yeah, I still feel like I could really use this thing. I think it would serve me really well. By all means, go for it. The wish list isn't about convincing you not to buy something. It's just about slowing down the process. The next principle I want to talk about is dissipating the dopamine hit. We all know that rush of dopamine that you feel when you either see something you really like, or maybe you're on the way to purchasing it, or maybe you added it to your cart. But we all know that feeling of excitement, that feeling of dopamine. And it feels good, which is why sometimes this, vicious cycle can get really out of hand for some people, because we're all just chasing that dopamine hit. Like I said, whether it's something that we found that we really like, whether it's getting the notification that something we bought is on its way or it's being delivered today, like that feeling is very familiar to, not only myself, but I'm assuming many of you as well. So a key part of being an intuitive shopper, and this kind of goes into my last point about slowing down the process, is about giving it some time for that dopamine to dissipate. So this is walking away from your cart for a few hours. This is even just being with yourself in the moment and taking a few deep breaths and asking yourself, would I be thinking about this item if I didn't just see it online? Like, would I think of it as a gap that I need to fill in my life if I didn't actually see it? It's just about retraining your brain to understand why you're actually feeling this dopamine hit, which is always going to happen and it's always going to feel good and everything. But it's just about recognizing that it is happening and slowing down and asking yourself some questions about why you're actually feeling that way. Okay, so another principle I want to talk about, and honestly, this is one that I just want to shout from the rooftops. I want everybody to hear me when I say this. This is crucial, okay? And that is, you need to be cool with paying the shipping fees. I know that it hurts to pay for shipping because you're not really getting anything tangible from it. I mean, you're getting something shipped to you. You're paying for the service of the shipment, but there's nothing there to show for it other than the item obviously showing up on your doorstep. But how many times have you added something to your cart just so you can hit that free shipping minimum? For me, a lot. Free shipping is never actually free if you have to pay for extra items to get there. Now, if you just naturally hit the free shipping minimum, that's great. If you find a bunch of things that are actually going to serve you and, that are going to perform well within your life, that's totally fine. I also want to be clear that I know this is vastly different for any of my international viewers. Like, I'm in the States, obviously, so I'm just talking about pretty much what I know about shipping within the States or to the States. So I do recognize that international shipping is a lot more expensive. But like I said, if you can meet that minimum with things that are actually going to serve you, then that is great. But if you're not, A, do you really need the item that you're going to buy? And B, is it worth adding a bunch of other stuff that you might not even use just to meet that minimum? Again, international viewers out there, I can't really speak for you guys. Tell me actually what you think in the comments down below. Like, do you always try to meet that minimum to get the free shipping, or are you willing to pay the, I don't even know how much things are, probably like $20, $30, maybe even more for that matter, for certain items. Just let me know in the comments. I'm very curious. But if you are somebody who is adding more products just to get that free shipping minimum, I recommend you take a step back and understand that you are paying for the service of it being shipped to you, and that is perfectly okay. So obviously there's a lot of nuance to this specific principle, but I think that if you are conscious about what you're actually adding to meet that minimum, and if you're actually okay and cool with paying the shipping fee, then you're fine. The next principle I want you to keep in mind is to remember who you are actually buying for. And I don't mean for, like your husband or your kids or your dog or whoever. I mean, you need to keep in mind which version of yourself you are shopping for. Are you buying for the realistic version of yourself right now? Or are you buying for the fantasy version of yourself? I think it's really easy for us to use clothing almost as a bridge to try to access this fantasy version of ourselves. And that can get a little toxic, of course, because then a lot of the times we will end up with a closet or with a home full of items that we can't actually put to use. This is primarily with clothes, of course, but it could happen in other categories of your home as well. But I've definitely been there when it comes to buying a bunch of things that I know, aren't serving this version of me, and they're serving this version of me that is very extroverted and wants to go out all the time and wants to, do XYZ, and that's not me. So being an intuitive shopper means that you need to be brutally honest with yourself about what is actually fitting into your current existing lifestyle. Now, one of my favorite questions I like to ask myself, am I able to wear this tomorrow or this week? If the answer is no, then it's probably not for me. So this principle is really important just to make sure that whatever you are buying is actually going to be used. And the last principle that I want to talk about is, do you already own something that gets the job done? I think a lot of the times we try to convince ourselves that we need something new, even if we already have something that, like I said, gets the job done. Maybe the item is a different color, or maybe it has a different feature that you find really cool. But I think the most important question to ask at the end of the day is, do I already have something that serves this purpose? Now, this is something that I was notorious for doing a few years ago, especially when it came to t-shirts. I would just buy the same t-shirt in a slightly different color, or I would have 3 white t-shirts in my closet, and I would only ever reach towards one. So I think recognizing if you already have something that gets the job done, that serves a similar purpose, is key. Saving you money, saving you closet space, and saving you the, decision paralysis potentially of being like, which one do I wear? They all look the same. This is a really simple principle, but it's also very powerful because this is another place where those critical thinking skills come into play. And you have to ask yourself, what do I already have that gets the job done? Maybe take an inventory. Maybe before you go buy something, check through your closet or your kitchen gadgets or whatever you're shopping for and say, do I already have something like this? Trust me, you'll be so happy if you don't waste the money or you don't waste the closet space, and you'll just be much happier, trust me. All right, you guys, those are all my principles for being an intuitive shopper. I'm sure there are many, many more that I could cover, but these are the ones that have been the most impactful for me. Do me a favor, leave a comment down below with one thing new that you potentially learned today, or let me know a tip that you've implemented into your life that has helped you become a more intuitive shopper. I would love to hear about it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.